Welcome to the second season of the Neurokrish Immersion, in which we are starting with an exploration of the many phases of freedom. Our first archetype in this journey is the Buddha, whose freedom from reaction as the regulator observer is well known and worthy of re-exploration. Some people seek freedom by understanding the self, others by serving others, others by losing themselves in art or devotion, and some by learning to relate differently to experience itself. Freedom is not one final state, not one universal method, but different psychological pathways through which human beings move towards liberation. Today, we begin this last pathway, the archetype of freedom that comes not by changing who you are, but by changing how the mind responds to what happens. This is the pathway most clearly represented by the Buddha, a path of regulation, awareness, and compassion. Freedom here does not come from asking, who am I really? But from asking, what should I let go of? And this difference matters because it shapes the entire spiritual psychology that follows. It has become fashionable to associate Buddhism with the mystical. But if you read the early discourses carefully, you will find something quite different. The Buddha was a rational investigator. He insisted on direct observation, on verification through experience, on testing ideas in lived reality. He discouraged blind belief and rejected acceptance based solely on tradition or authority. He avoided speculation and set aside metaphysical theorizing in favor of direct experience. The Buddha encouraged inquiry. He promoted systematic investigation and personal verification. At one point, he even says, do not accept something because it is tradition, or because a teacher says it, or because it sounds logical. Examine it in your own experience. Indeed, he is famous for having said, the gates of freedom will no longer be the gates if we hold on to the gates. In many ways, he was laying down a method of psychological science 2.5 millennia ago. Truth, for him, was not revealed. It was discovered. The Buddha's early life was sheltered, protected from illness, from aging, from death. His brain learned a world of stability and pleasure. Then came the famous foresights. An old man, a sick man, a corpse, and finally a wandering ascetic. From a neuroscience perspective, this is about the internal model of reality collapsing. And when this internal model collapses, we do not just revise opinions, we experience existential shock. The Buddha did not turn away from this shock. He turned towards it. He tried extreme renunciation, fasting, mortification, severe discipline. This phase is deeply human. When suffering overwhelms us, we often try to control the body and suppress desire. His attempt was through extreme physical discipline and denial of bodily needs to find a path to liberation. The problem he encountered was that suppression is not freedom. Neuroscience indeed tells us that excessive inhibition actually strengthens internal conflict. His discovery was the body weakened, but the mind did not awaken. Something was fundamentally wrong with this approach. And the Buddha discovered this empirically. So he abandoned both indulgence and punishment, and something subtler became possible. This was the middle way, not a philosophy but physiological wisdom. A dysregulated nervous system cannot see clearly. Only when attention stabilizes, when emotion settles, can insight emerge. Freedom does not arise from force, it arises from clarity. This discovery marked a fundamental shift in understanding. The body and mind must be properly regulated before deeper insights can emerge. Indeed, the middle way demands that regulation has to come before realization happens. The very first verse of the Dhammapada says, "You are shaped by your mind." The word the Buddha used, mana, meant both mind and thought. He emphasized that thoughts are not static. They arise, they pass, and they condition one another. There are no standalone thoughts. There are no isolated mental events. The thinker, the thought, and the idea cannot be separated. Modern psychology tells us something similar. When thoughts appear without antecedents, out of nowhere, we consider that pathological. Healthy cognition is continuous, contextual, and relational. Thus, thoughts arise from prior conditions, thoughts flow through consciousness, thoughts condition future mental states. The Buddha also taught us that we never perceive the present directly. We perceive it through memory and emotion. Modern neuroscience agrees. The hippocampus retrieves memories and contextualizes present experience. And as I often say in this podcast, if you draw a line through your ears, it's there, right in the middle on both sides. The amygdala colors perception with emotional significance and balance. And as I've often said, it's a neighbor to the hippocampus. And again, it too is present in the middle on both sides. We then see the world as our nervous system predicts it to be, and what we call predictive processing. So when we see a snake, memory and fear activate together. We do not see the world as it is. We see it as our nervous system predicts it to be. Freedom, therefore, requires seeing how the past keeps shaping the present. In the Sallata Sutta, the Buddha tells a simple story. When pain occurs, an untrained person is struck by two arrows. The first arrow is unavoidable pain, the inherent suffering of existence, what you're experiencing at that point in time, what's causing you pain. The second arrow, on the other hand, is mental suffering. Why me? This should not be happening. I cannot accept it. Now, what the Buddha teaches us is that the trained mind feels only the first arrow. The pain remains, but the trained mind does not perceive the second arrow, and therefore reaction dissolves. This is freedom, not freedom from experience, but freedom from compulsion. In the fire sermon, the Buddha says the senses are burning, consciousness is burning, burning with craving, burning with aversion, burning with confusion. Nirvana, he says, means cooling, not annihilation, not transcendence. Compulsive reactions fueled by craving and aversion lead to burning in this concept. Non-participation in automatic mental loops fuels withdrawal from such burning. The fire goes out naturally when it is no longer fed, and this is cooling. The fire goes out, therefore, not by force, but when the fuel is withdrawn. Freedom, in his concept, is not suppression. It's non-participation in compulsive loops. Ask yourself, the last time you experienced suffering, was it the event itself that made you suffer? What you were experiencing as news, what you were experiencing as someone else's reaction, what you were experiencing in the situation that you were in. Was it that made you suffer? Or was it how you reacted to it, how you obsessively thought about it, how you argued with yourself? Why me? Why is this happening? That is the second arrow. That is the fire. And the Buddha points out that by not engaging in that, by withdrawing that fuel, you allow your nervous system to cool and the fire goes out naturally. Perhaps the most powerful story in the Buddha's tales is that of Angulimala, a violent criminal, feared everywhere. Indeed, he was called Angulimala because he wore a garland of fingers of people whom he had killed, whose fingers he kept as a trophy. He meets the Buddha. He does not experience condemnation. He does not experience fear. The only words he experiences are, I have stopped, you have not. Something shifts. Angulimala renounces violence. He becomes a monk. People still throw stones at him. The past remains, but the cycle of reaction ends. Angulimala's story is a story of neuroplasticity in action. From a brain's perspective, this is extraordinary. Habit circuits dissolve and new moral pathways form in the story. The Buddha believed profoundly in human plasticity long before neuroscience named it. This story of Angulimala demonstrates several key neurological principles. Deep-rooted behavioral patterns can be interrupted and reformed. Identity itself is not fixed but constructed through repeated mental patterns. Awareness and intentionality can reshape our neural pathways. Past conditioning does not determine future behavior. The transformation was not instantaneous erasure, but gradual wiring through sustained practice and awareness. So in this path, you need to first notice patterns and triggers for the behaviors you are engaging in or the emotions that things evoke in you. You need to pause these automatic responses and interrupt them. You need to then reform by creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving towards things. Remember from the story that you can interrupt and reform deep behavioral patterns. You can reconstruct the identity of the self that you have in your mind. You can do this through awareness and intentionality. And your past conditioning should not determine your future behavior. The Buddha's approach offers a comprehensive system for working with the reactive mind. It is neither suppression nor indulgence, but a third way, the way of awareness and regulation. The Buddha teaches us, notice reactions as they arise without immediately identifying with them or pushing them away. Understand your conditions. See how thoughts and emotions arise from previous conditions rather than appearing spontaneously. Create space within. Develop the capacity to pause between stimulus and response, allowing wisdom to emerge. I was once very angry about something that someone had said inside an organization I was working in. I didn't like the response. I found it racial. This was when I was living abroad. And I went and expressed this to my very British boss. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, write an email and save it in your in your folder. Come back and look at it tomorrow. The email that you then send out will be the right email. What he asked me to do was to create space, not to emotionally respond immediately to the provocation, but to allow it to settle within me, think about it, and be more rational in my response when I came back to that email the next day. This is the ability to create space, the capacity to pause between stimulus and response. Most of us find this very hard. And then the Buddha says, act from understanding than with automatic compulsion, which is extremely important. And so this, observing without judgment, understanding how thoughts arise and how thoughts follow and how emotions follow, creating space, responding with clarity, this is the path of regulation that the Buddha talks about. I'd like to now take you back to my Monk's Brain podcast, which showed us what happens to you when you meditate, because meditation is really a form of stilling the brain. Long-term Tibetan Buddhist monks, when they meditate, actually change the way their brains listen to their own heartbeats. When researchers used fMRI and EEG, they saw that the default mode network, a set of brain regions which is active when your mind wanders, briefly shifts its activity in time with each heartbeat during meditation. Brainwave patterns in theta, slow, and gamma, fast bands, reorganize across large brain networks when these monks meditate. The strength of certain slow wave connections, theta connections, decreases the more the number of years of meditation experience someone has. And fast gamma waves become tightly linked to slow theta waves only during meditation. Altogether, these findings mean that meditation not only changes how different parts of the brain talk to each other, but also how the brain and heart communicate. And that with more practice, these changes become deeper and more lasting. Your brain and heart can therefore be in synchrony. And if you are thinking about the default mode network, remember that areas like the amygdala, the insula, the temporoparietal junction, these are critical parts of that network. And this meditation causing changes in the way that the brain functions and showing us the link between the brain and the heart is at the heart of what Buddhism teaches. This is how you create that space. This is how you learn to observe your thoughts. This is how you are able to bring about a change in the way that you respond. This archetype of freedom is fundamentally different from others that we will explore. It does not ask you to discover your true self. It does not ask you to serve or surrender. It asks you to change your relationship to your own experience. The goal is not to become someone different. The goal is to stop being driven by automatic patterns of reactivity that cause suffering. This is the freedom from compulsive reaction that the Buddha preaches. This path appears in mindfulness traditions where contemporary practices rooted in Buddhist techniques help you observe mental phenomena without attachment. This also appears in modern psychotherapy, cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and other approaches that work with thought patterns and emotional regulation. It's also a part of everyday acts, moments of patience, restraint, and conscious response in the midst of ordinary challenges. This archetype, therefore, appears whenever human beings learn to pause, learn to observe, and learn to soften their responses. It is embedded in therapeutic practices, in contemplative traditions, and simple acts of mindful living. But it's not the only path, and that is crucial to understand. Some minds are not primarily trapped by reaction. They are trapped by identity, the story of who they think they are. The Buddha's path addresses how we respond to experience. But there is another question that some minds find more fundamental. Who's responding? For those minds, freedom does not come by regulating emotion. It comes by questioning the self itself. So what are the key insights that we've had today? That direct investigation and empirical experience are important. The truth is discovered through experience, not through doctrine. The middle way is important. We need to regulate body and mind as a foundation for insight. Thoughts as process are important. Mental phenomena arise conditionally and flow continuously. We learnt about the two arrows. Pain is inevitable, the first arrow, but the reactive suffering that we have is optional. Cooling is important, not fighting. The fire sermon, freedom through non-participation rather than suppression. And we learned about neural plasticity. Deep patterns can be transformed through awareness and practice. What the Buddha offers us is a systematic method for working with the reactive mind, not through force or suppression, but through understanding and gentle regulation. The empirical approach he teaches is a method that can be tested and verified in direct experience. It has universal applicability. The principles work across cultures, belief systems, and contexts. There are a range of practical tools which come today through mindfulness meditation, specific techniques that work with difficult mental states. There is profound hope, evidence that even deeply conditioned patterns can change. Remember Angulimala, a mass murderer, could change in an instant when he met the Buddha. This teaching of the Buddha has survived 2500 years, not because it is mystical or exotic, but because it works. People who apply these principles genuinely experience less suffering. They become less reactive, more compassionate, more able to be with difficulty without being overwhelmed by it. This is not magic. It is the natural reset of understanding how the mind constructs suffering and learning to interrupt those patterns. The Buddha offers us one phase of freedom. Freedom from compulsive reaction. Freedom from adding suffering to pain. Freedom through awareness and emotional regulation. This archetype appears wherever human beings learn to pause, observe, and soften their responses. In mindfulness traditions, in psychotherapy, in everyday acts of patience and restraint. But it is not the only path. Some minds are not trapped only by reaction. They are trapped by identity, by the story of who they think they are. For those minds, freedom does not come by regulating emotion. It comes by questioning the self itself. And that brings us to the next phase of freedom, the radical knower, the path of recognition, the life of Adi Shankara, where the Buddha asks, why do I keep reacting? Shankara asks something more fundamental. Who is the one who reacts? Where the Buddha regulates the mind, Shankara dissolves the boundary between observer and observed. Where the Buddha offers freedom through awareness of mental processes, Shankara offers freedom through recognition that you are not those processes at all. This is a different archetype entirely, and that is where our journey continues. If you liked what you're listening to here at the Neurokrish Immersion, please subscribe and share. We are on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. Thank you so much.